Good day coders, in this video I'll be covering Angular components. From creating an Angular component using the CLI, I'll be explaining the component structure and actually how to pass data into a component and emitting data out of a component. And we will make this possible by building a counter app. So how do you actually create a component? So what I like to do is all my components, I like to create a folder for components in my apps in here. Then I'd have to then cd into that specific folder. So it's src apps components. Then there's this angular-cli command that you need to run to actually generate a component. So there's ng. It's either you can write the full word generate, or you can just give this G, and then which stands for generate, and C, which stands for component, or you can write the full name component and then the name of your component. So this component is going to be called counter. Okay, so what this will do is in this folder it will actually create this counter component. So what's the component structure? So you've got your HTML over here. This is where you'll put in all your markup, right? Your HTML code. And then in here you've got your SCSS. This is where we'll actually be styling it out. And then we've got the spec. This is basically, I could say, the test or unit test for that component that Angular generates for us. And then we also have this counter components tiers. This is where you actually write your logic of that component. So let's go ahead and actually try to build like something, right? So now that we've actually got this component, what we can do is run and okay, I think I made a mistake, so I need to cd into that. Angular YouTube Angular basics. Okay, so okay, I'm in the project again. So what do I need to do now? I'll run this. So I'll run an ng serve. So now my Angular project is actually now served. What I'll just basically need to do is over here it's actually still running. Okay, so let's create something, right? So what I'll actually do is I'll have like a counter container in here, just put in a button, which is minus button. Then in here I'll have like a counter. So this is going to be counter, which is actually a number, and it will actually start from 0, right? So over here we'll have this guy, and then we've got like a button here, and we'll have a plus. Okay, awesome. So this is what we have, right? So now that's saved, but we're not actually seeing what's in like our actual component, right? And this is because this component is not yet utilized. So how do we go about doing that? We can come here in our actual apps HTML. So then we can say app counter, and this is how we actually use this actual component, right? But now this says, it complains that app counter is not known, and this is because we need to actually import this over here. So Angular automatically imported it, but it's not yet saved. So if we go ahead and save it, and if we come here, you'll actually see this component. So let me just have a bit of some stylings there to actually get this sorted, right? So I'll just have this guy over here, okay, and this would be like a span, and yeah, just gonna do so I'll just say display flex, right, column gap of 10 pixels, right, and then I'll just have like a button style. Just say 14 pixels, 14 pixels, and then I'll just say color, color, just give it a blue color. Okay, then align item center, then just have a span there of, actually give it like a size, font size, which is just gonna be 30 pixels, right? And a font weight of 700, or you can say it's bold, right? Okay, I guess this is all fine, right, for this actual component, right? So now we want to actually put some functionality to this component. So we'll say handle increment, right? And then we'll have like a handle decrement. Okay, so these are the two functions, right? So for increment, we're just gonna say this dot counter plus plus, right? And then this dot counter, then minus minus for decrement. So we know that the minus is for decrement, so we'll just tie in this over here, this function for on click. So if we now click on this button on here, we'll just say this is increment, right? So let's see what actually happens now, right? So I've saved. If I click on this, you'll see it's actually incrementing, and then if I click on this, this will actually decrement, right? So I've actually like added like some functionality to that actual two buttons. Now we want to understand an instance whereby we want to pass data, right? So we want to pass data from our parent component into our child component, right? So how do we actually pass in data into a component? So how we go about doing that is using like an input, right? Because we're actually inputting data to this this component, and then you just need to make sure, right, once you've done this input, so it's at input, sorry, my bad. So if I say at inputs, then I can actually import this input from angular-cli, right? So what this will do is, if you see this application, it will still start from 0, right? Because we had notified it that if there isn't any value we're passing into the components, just initialize it as 0. But now from this parent component, which is rendering this component, we can actually now pass in this counter and just give it a number. So we'll give it 3. So the moment this actually loads up, it should be initialized at 3. Then if we click on this, you'll see that the counter is actually counting, and this will be actually decrementing, right? And then now that that's that, so we also want to understand, how do we then pass data from our actual component to our parent component? So how we go about doing that is, in your actual component that you've actually created, we need to use this output, right? And this is actually an event emitter, right? So what are we going to say? We're going to say counter change, or we can just say on counter change, right? So this is what we're going to call it. Okay, this is an event emitter, right? And we want to specify what this event emitter is going to pass in, right? This is just going to pass in like a number, and then in here we'll just use this, right? Okay, so now how do we actually now emit data to our actual parent component, right? So we then use this out on counter emitter dot emit, right? And then we just pass it like the value, right, that we've actually passed in here, right, which is a number. So the same thing that we're actually going to do over here, and that's basically what we need. So now if I actually come in here and actually do this, right, it's actually going to be emitting something. But let me just first come to this parent component and say, give it maybe an h1 tag, display value from child, right? So this value from child component, and I'm just gonna say maybe component number equals to 0. Okay, so I want to show you something, right? So if I pass this in, right, and actually try to do that, because I'm not actually changing that value, this will still stay at 0, right? But how I actually can get that is using this brackets, and then I pass in this on counter output. And then what I basically want to do is component child. I can just do this, right? This component number and equate it to this event, right? So if I do this, right, if I click on here, the value that's coming in from this value here is then going to be passed in to our actual parent component. If I actually decrement, you'll see that it's actually changing. So now if I were to go to my actual parent component, over here, and go about changing this and saying initialize it from 0, and I start this, if I actually increment, you'll see that it's actually changing there, even if when I actually want to decrement. So now you'll see that I can pass data into my component, and I can also emit data from my actual component. So if you're new to the channel and you like this, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.